a portion of the Colonel Rolls subdivision. We have Mark Slager here, and I'll turn it to Joe for anything from staff.
Yeah, just very briefly, Mr. Chair, so this is a request for one particular lot. What they're looking to do is basically capture a portico that was put on later on during the construction of the property on Lot 3. And the board has the capability to reduce the setback down to 15 feet. Previously, during your approval, you reduced it to 20. This portico brought it from meeting the 20-foot setback to going within the 20 to 15 range, I guess. So, Mark, do you have anything to add on to that?
No, not really. It's a special permit for an open space residential development. And the board at the time required a front yard setback to be 20 feet as opposed to its normal minimum of 15. And that was to allow for parking between the garage and the right-of-way line. In this particular case, we met that. And then when the front porch was built, there was a roof that was put over just over the front steps, and that encroached within the 20-foot setback, and it comes to 16.9 feet. Still meets the minimum that allowed, the planning board is allowed to reduce it to, but it doesn't meet what the current special permit allows. And this is just a roof. There's no living space in there. It's just the landing on the front porch. And that's the only request that we're requesting.
It's only this particular lot.
It's only for this particular lot and only for the roof over the front porch.
Okay. Questions from board members? Joan?
Yeah, I do. So I went over there and looked at it, and I guess my question would be, why did you construct it without coming back first? I think I'm kind of seeing a disturbing trend in the town that this keeps happening. And, you know, it's not a big deal, it's only a few feet, totally understand, but I'm sure the developer knew very well that it was going to be encroaching in the setback.
I don't know if he was aware. Certainly, I mean, I was the one that positioned everything, and if Joe pulls up the other plan, it showed the as-built foundation. You know, and everything looked fine, and I guess it was just an oversight that there was gonna be a roof over the front porch. Everything, you know, according to this, looked fine. There was another proposed plot plan done that showed the walkway, the steps, but, you know, the fact that there's gonna be a roof over it, it was just an oversight, and I didn't pick it up until I was getting ready to do the final as-built to submit for occupancy.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Mike?
Also.
Darren?
No, I think we've seen one of these instances in the past, and it was just the roof. It was not an issue.
I think this is the second one we've seen for Colonel Rolls.
No, this is the only one for Colonel Rolls. We saw a similar request for Spalding Hill Estates during that project.
Yeah.
Different project. But I've seen, it's pretty minor, so no issues.
Tom?
No problem.
Okay, can I get a motion to, I guess, to approve the request for the minor modification
So moved.
as presented tonight?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Great, thank you very much.
The next item, this is a public hearing for White Lane.
You wanna do
Before I start with the motions, I just want to make one statement.
Minutes.
Oh, okay. Yes, let's do a review, as we're in general business. The minutes for June 1st are in the packet. Any questions or comments on those minutes?
A motion that we approve the minutes for June 1st and June 15th.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
For White Lane, let me just make a statement here. I have reviewed this with town staff. There shouldn't be an issue. I live at 7 Blakes Hill Road. My property is approximately 325 feet at the closest point on my driveway to the right lane parcel. However, I'm also a member of the Orchard Hills Trust Association, and we have our conservation parcel that comes close to the 300 foot. I couldn't find exactly where it hit 300 feet, but I just want to make that statement, so if there's any concerns, I will recuse myself, but I do feel I can act in a non-biased fashion for this matter. I just want to make that statement. All right, so hearing no complaints. Can I first get a motion to waive the reading for the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Well,
PB
excuse me.
26,
I think, wasn't there a request to waive the fees? Do you want to do that before you open?
okay.
So you do have a request to waive the application fee. This did present really a onerous review from town staff at all, simply because it is a request just to reissue a special permit. So we would have no objection to that if that was the board's wish on this application request.
So I'll make a motion to waive the application fees for PB 2613.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the hearing, let me get a request to open the hearing for PB 2613 for a special permit for a common drive for right lane.
So,
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Okay. Joe, do you want to provide a report on this?
Sure, again, just briefly, for the board's consideration this evening, you have this request. The applicant had a special permit for a common driveway previously issued in 2019. Through a series of circumstances, the permit lapsed, so the applicant's here tonight requesting that the board reissue that special permit. They're not looking to make any changes to the plans that were approved, no changes to the conditions that were in your decision prior, just looking for you to reissue a fresh decision with a fresh expiration date, if you will, for it. One thing that might be of interest to the board is if you were to go down that route and issue a new special permit, is to have an updated plan set. Normally on the plans, you'll have the surrounding property owners identified on that. There have been some surrounding properties that have changed hands since that time frame. So we'd likely need an updated plan set for that and to capture any other changes that were made to address conditions of your approval before. So that might be something for consideration. I don't know if the applicants have anything to add.
Well, all the abutters did get notice of the meeting, and nothing's really changed. It's the same. So I'm not sure why a new map would need to be drawn.
If I could make a comment on that, there are two things that are at issue with the current plans that are on file. First off, in the 7 years, the plans are out of date with respect to the identification of the abutter on the plan. Those names have changed on a number of the parcels. And second, somehow a mistake got through on the plans 7 years ago. In the upper left of the plans, which is now the lower right because the plans are upside down, there is a parcel shown as 15 Rome Drive. If you look at the town's GIS system, that is not 15 Rome Drive. That is in actuality, that is 20 Blake's Hill Road. So those plans will need to be corrected.
In my opinion, other than that, we did the site walk back when this came out so many years ago. I think Ms. Collins has been a great asset to this town, donated quite a bit of land to conservation. I would have no issue reissuing this decision.
I think Joni
Yeah,
had
I
one
just had
question.
one question, and I'm not sure, yeah, more, and I'm looking more at you, Joe. Stormwater, there'll be a change now. I don't know, but this was approved in 2019, so I don't know how much of an update there's been to stormwater. But is that something I think we need to ask engineering? Is it still okay for stormwater, number one? And number two, or actually I have three little things. That's number one. Number two, is the current fire chief okay with that 10% grade? I just think we need to ask that question again for his trucks. Because again, it's a different fire chief. And I did, in reading all the waivers, I saw that there was a waiver for the size of the water main, and it was requesting a 2-inch, but yet the drawings show a 6-inch. So that might need to be corrected as well. I'm not sure what the status of the waivers versus the drawings. Again, I mean, I wasn't here at that time, so just 3 little inconsistencies or 2 inconsistencies and 1. We need to ask engineering about the stormwater.
For the benefit of the applicant, in the last several years, stormwater management laws have changed with the state and federal. And in some cases, that can drive a different kind of review regarding curbing, swales, retention basins. And so we just need to get engineering input to make sure that this plan for the driveway, I guess, complies with the current law. But that's it. But otherwise, I'm
If they
fine.
had come in before it expired and asked to extend this, would we have had to do that? No? And I think it's just a shame to make them go through all this when it's just an extension of a decision we've already done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't suspect that would have been a request of the board, but obviously that's not what's before you. To that point, we did have comments from the fire department saying that they were still fine.
They're still fine, okay, good.
With the proposal as it is today. I mean, if the board would like, you could review the draft decision at your next meeting. So that way, if for some reason, upon getting a new plan set, we noticed there was some issue that needed to be addressed, we'd be happy to work with the applicant and through our engineering department to make sure it's addressed.
Yeah, I'm fine with
Yeah.
voting to support this tonight pending administrative review for the stormwater question.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, Tom or Darren?
Fine with that.
Sounds good.
And I think it's more for your benefit too. We don't want to be in a situation where there's a problem later on for you. So it's better to just ask the question up front.
All right, so, want to make a motion?
Yep.
Can I get a motion to
Did you
approve
want any
PB
comments from
26?
the public?
Oh.
Oh.
Comment, public.
Any comments from the public?
Public comment, you want to ask for public?
Any public comment? I don't think they're here for this.
Well, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for TBV 2613 Right Lane.
All in.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
A
Okay.
motion approve PB 2613 subject to administrative review based upon the discussion this evening.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item, 174 Littleton Road, for the signage for Liquor Junction. The applicant, one of the participants has requested that we continue this to our next meeting on the 14th of September. Can I get a motion to continue PB 2610, 174 Littleton Road?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. With that, we have PB 2612 for a zoning change to amend the zoning bylaw for small clean energy infrastructure facilities. And I turn it over to Joe.
Sure, very briefly, Mr. Chair. So we do have Ryan from the Fire Department, we have Kelly from NIMCOG here this evening, here to answer any questions that the board may have. I think it might make sense to start with Kelly, just to highlight the changes from the last time this board met to review this proposed bylaw for special town meeting. And from there, you can go into any questions that you may have.
Great.
So thank you for having me again, Kelly Weinema, Deputy Director at the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. The memo that was provided to you basically reflects the changes that were suggested at the last planning board hearing, as well as some comments that I received afterward. You rightfully noted a couple of inconsistencies that were corrected throughout the document. And then I think more substantively, there were a few changes regarding I think just adding a few clauses or adding, for example, I think under page 7, under noise, adding a clause to permit the SPGA to require a noise study, regarding fencing, allowing the planning board to waive height minimum or height maximum requirements, and if additional height in fencing would be necessary. We've added a few bullet points regarding emergency response on page 15. Those were actually suggested in the prior memo, and we moved those directly to the text of the zoning. Specifying that the local government representative would be the land use department as the entity that would receive and process the applications and make sure that they were complete applications before the official 12-month process would begin. One thing I do want to know is I know that in our conversation last month, there were some questions about specific kind of fire prevention related issues and whether those belonged in the zoning or not. One thing I do want to clarify is that as part of an application, the applicant is required to submit an emergency response plan in draft form. And part of that 12-month process is a negotiation, or not a negotiation, a discussion and approval required by the fire department that emergency response plan does meet all necessary requirements by the local fire department. And so I think we're hoping to avoid crossing the streams between local fire requirements and, sorry for the reference there, but trying to make sure that we don't overly complicate the zoning by incorporating other boards or committee or expertise in the zoning where that could effectively become obsolete or change over time, and you don't want to have to go back and update the zoning to reflect different standards from different departments. The main questions that I think in making these amendments to the draft zoning, I think some of the main questions we've highlighted on the second page of the memo. The first two questions really deal with your districts. So in what districts is it appropriate for these uses to be allowed by right, with site plan review, or by special permit? And this is also drawing a distinction between principal uses or accessory uses. And so we've augmented the tables on page 39 to show what the Department of Energy Resources actually recommends. This is not necessarily our recommendation. This isn't a reflection of what the board has already decided. This is for your deliberation. So in what districts should solar uses and battery electric storage be allowed by right, by special permit, or by site plan review? And that really addresses questions 1 and 2. And then the other one is that under section 6.6.5 design standards, that's on pages 8 to 9 of the memo, we've included recommended front, side, and rear yard setbacks. So the front and side yard setbacks would be 20 feet, but 50 feet if abutting a residential district, and a recommended rear yard setback of 25 feet or 50 if abutting a residential district. And wondering if that is satisfactory to the board, or if the board would want to set different standards for those setback requirements. The one thing I do want to note in both considering where these uses are allowed by right or special permit or site plan review and where those setbacks are, what setbacks are appropriate, is you don't want to effectively restrict or overly prohibit these uses in a large area of town, because that could be seen in violation with the intent of the law. And so with that, I'll hand it back to the chair or Jeff or
So I don't know
sorry,
if you wanna
Joe.
have any of the members have any questions for Fire or for Kelly?
Joe?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, my big concern obviously is fire suppression.
Sure.
And I know there's been so many changes, and obviously, I totally agree that emergency response should be in your lane, and you should approve it, and should have nothing to do with that. But is there fire suppression available today for these type of systems?
So, as with anything, it depends, right? So, the idea is the way that these types of systems, by the way, Ryan Monett, Westford Fire Department Fire Prevention Office. The way these systems are built is so that they have so many built-in redundancies to make sure that there isn't an emergency that gets out of hand to begin with, right? The idea is technology moves very fast, and we have our strategies for mitigating fires when it comes to these types of systems and installations. We already have a number of residential-sized power walls and such in homes around town. And also many, as you, I'm sure, have seen electric vehicles on the roads. Each one comes with their own specific issues and problems and concerns. My minimal exposure to these types of installations are such that they segregate them. So you don't have the entirety of the storage in one area per se. They're put into separate fireproof boxes and such, that sort of thing, with their own detection and possible suppression systems internally. That being said, we would isolate them and shut them down in such a way that we protect the exposures from let's say there's 8 boxes with batteries in them. We protect the 7 of them that are not having an event, and try to mitigate or isolate that one to be able to keep it in space. These are all practices that we, as time has gone on, we've been more reactive than proactive, just because of the nature of the beast. Right? We're talking about very densely packed energy systems that are basically so difficult for us to get to with our conventional means, with suppression and so forth. We typically would pull things apart to get to where we need to get to it to extinguish any sorts of fires. These are not that, and there's a lot of considerations for exposure of chemicals, electricity itself, heavy metals, all of these things that we have to be concerned about. So we've been concentrating our efforts more on protection of surrounding areas and surrounding perhaps other battery installations. So if that answers your question, or if it doesn't, it's one of those things that it's a very dynamic practice for us to try to figure out what's working best and how things are being done throughout the country and the world. Different places have different means of, in regard to mobile systems or smaller systems, ways in which to mitigate them. It's isolation and protection of exposure is really where we are right now, and of course life safety first and foremost. That said, depending on where the installation is, we'll recognize the fact that as part of an emergency plan, that if there is an installation near or around some sort of residential or high volume area, that we would recognize that immediately and be able to, just like any other hazardous situation, to isolate and also evacuate if need be. So it's kind of a multi-pronged thing that we would have. So.
Okay, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
course.
Helps a lot. So with that, I think on these tables, even the tier 1 in the residential, I think should at least be, a site plan review. I don't know how everyone else feels about it. At least in the residential area. And as far as the setbacks go, I kind of look to the experts to say, do you feel 50 feet setback would be enough?
I will say 2 things to your first comment about plan review. I plan to review every single battery installation residentially that occurs, and they're much less power than what's indicated on here. So myself, in conjunction with the electrical inspector and the building commission, we do a full plan review for multiple reasons, right? Protection of the batteries, where they're being installed, what we have to worry about within that building. That said, the setbacks within the fire code are actually less than what we're discussing here. So the allowance by NFPA for installations is 10 feet depending. So, and that's setback to exposure, right? So that's the idea. Having more is always, in my opinion, a better idea. That comes, I would suspect, to the planning board to figure out what the best course of action would be. But as far as these numbers are concerned, I'd be fully content with those because, again, they seem to exceed the planning board itself. So,
Thank you.
yes.
That's it.
With respect to that question, can I poll the board as to how they feel about what Joni requested?
I have a question in regards to setbacks though, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So with the setbacks, and I'm not sure where the question actually goes to, setbacks be able to be varied based upon the types of batteries that are going to be used? So whether it's lithium or it's nickel manganese, the levels are completely different.
Exactly, and that would come down to what we're talking about for if and when there's a failure, what method of action we would have within that system to say, is it smaller batteries packed into a larger area? and what is the chemistry involved, and those are all the things that we have to concern ourselves with. Typically again, not experienced myself, but my understanding, my knowledge of the systems is that if and when this would ever to occur, that we had a runaway system or a fire, we would most certainly be calling the district hazardous materials team for their expertise, because while we do have hazardous materials technicians on our department, we don't operate as such. So we would look to them to give us a better understanding of what a game plan would be to mitigate an emergency. So that said, they have their own chemistry teams that work with them. So based on what our understanding of what the chemistry of the said batteries might be, that would maybe dictate what our tactics and strategies might be to mitigate an emergency. Our concern is isolation of runoff, if there is any. So if we're using water to cool and or isolate a situation, we need to make sure that that is not then getting into the water table, anywhere that we don't want it to be. A lot of times these systems are built with an automatic area that will hold certain amounts of water for us if we are using water to mitigate an emergency. We would make comment on that based on the installation during the plan review process, and that's why we kind of like the idea of, I don't care what size batteries it is that are being installed, we'd like to be able to have our say in giving our opinion about what we have that you're presenting to us based on the application for the permit. So we can give a better idea for both the people doing the installation and also for us to know what's going to actually be placed there. So we have a emergency response plan beforehand, right, to be a little bit prepared for it.
Thank you.
Sir.
Darren?
Yeah, to your question, I wouldn't be opposed to having site plan review for residential A and B for tier 1 through 3.
Mark?
So, we're talking about, so like the site plan review for the first two categories as well?
Yes, tier 1.
Oh, okay, oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed for residential.
I would agree on that. I would also, so for the best tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, I agree. I think it should be special permit reviewed by the planning board for residential, for tier 1. And as shown for tier 2 and tier 3, where it says SPR, I think I would also like it to be a special permit reviewed by the planning board to allow for fire and safety input on that. And then where we have the setbacks, we probably need a footnote in there that these are the minimum setbacks and that additional setback may be required pending fire and safety review for the specific installation. With respect to the building mounted canopy solar, I'm fine as it is there. But for the small ground mounted solar, there is no sizing statement on that. And we probably need to get, I'm assuming it's between, I don't know what it is, to be honest.
It's probably in the definition, I'm just checking here. No, actually. I think we'll have to check out, I'm gonna have to cross-reference that with the guidance, but that's a good observation.
But I would like to see for small ground mounted and medium ground mounted, those be SPBs instead of SPRs and Ys for the residential, business, and commercial highway districts.
Okay, can you repeat that one more time? So
Small ground mounted
yes.
and medium ground mounted should all be SPB for RA, RB, B, BL, and CH. Which is the,
Okay, thank you. So
Yeah,
SPB for
commercial
all 10.
yeah.
Would that also be for accessory use? We're just looking at the principal use regulations right now.
I think that
The
would be-
accessory use regulations are on the following page.
I would agree. I would think they should be the same.
Okay, all right.
Now, we're talking about small ground-mounted solar. That's not for someone's personal residential use. This is still gonna be a commercial, you know,
I
small.
think we
clean
need, I
energy
think I'd like to
infrastructure.
see, that gets to another question I have, which is, I'd like to see something besides just the power capacity for a statement. I'd like to see some physical sizing parameters for these. I think it's only fair, and especially in a residential district, to know that this is no greater than this many square feet for the pad. Same thing for the best, especially in residential, you know, I don't know how big these structures are gonna be. I don't know how obtrusive they're gonna be, but if you're putting this in amongst homes and you're building a large block building, I would like to see it so that we have some way to fit it, site it compatibly in a residential neighborhood. We have a question from the audience. If you want to ask, come to the mic, state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Emily Byrne at 8 Wheeler Lane. I was just interested to understand the small ground mounted size of the system as well, and whether there's restrictions on where within a lot it can be placed and what the setbacks are. I'm coming a little cold here, but I'm actually a small utility solar developer myself, so this was one of my questions in general for the town, because I do think that they can be unsightly sometimes, so I think that it's nice to make sure that there's
Yeah, and that's what
proper
we're
siting.
working to set. And I think you'd be talking more about the first one, which is the building mounted or canopy solar, or
Yeah,
possibly
less than
small
25
ground
kW is-
mounted.
small. So I don't understand the difference between one and, I mean, I guess you're saying small ground, but it's
One,
probably
but the
less
building,
than
one would
25.
be on the roof.
Right, but I guess they'd both be less than 25.
Ground mounted would be what you see out here, over in the distance.
Right. Yeah, I think that would be great if it was,
And I'd like to
site
see,
plan for approval for
I think
that.
anything off the building, I'd like to see further definition, ability to restrict what the physical size and presence is. That would include height as well. Any other comments from the board?
Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience on this topic for the table of accessory uses for, and primary use?
Thanks. Mike Berlinski, 37 Crown Road, speaking as a member of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee Working Group working on the clean energy facility siting and planning. So just on this topic and sort of responding to a comment that was made in the last meeting in terms of this table of uses and what requirements there should be for different tiers. I think that a lot of the discussion has been around the batteries, but I think for solar too, I encourage the board to consider differentiating by size as well, size of system in terms of power, energy, kilowatt hour, kilowatt, as well as what kind of zone it's located in. Because I think a solar system on a residential roof that's about 6 kilowatts, I think has a different impact and feature concern level compared to say 100 kilowatts that's on a residential property, but that's maybe differently viewable and accessible. So even though they may be in the same horizontal category, I would just encourage the board to consider different restrictions, requirements on that. For example, professional plans and other requirements, I think that should be differentiated, both solar and batteries. You know, a 10 kilowatt hour Tesla Powerwall in someone's garage, I think is different than, a couple 100 kilowatt hour battery system in a shipping container on a property. So I just encourage the board to consider, differentiating by system size as well as by a zone that the system is located in. I think some of these tiers are kind of capture different types of projects. Thanks.
Before you leave, Mike, can we, best tier one, would that include the Tesla type of system and only that kind of system?
So I see that up to 250 kilowatt hours. So a Tesla Powerwall might be about 10 kilowatt hours. For reference, my EV has an 80 kilowatt hour battery in it. So, and the Tesla Powerwall in my neighbor's basement, future garages would be on the order of 10 kilowatt hours. So again, that's something that is maybe, I don't know your restrictions on diesel backup generators, but that might have less energy capability and fire considerations than a diesel generator. That 10 kilowatt hour, residential use like a Tesla Powerwall as an example. So just, that first battery tier just encompasses a lot of different types of projects.
So should there be another tier below best tier 1? That's my question.
That's what I was just about to say, maybe
Yeah.
we need it.
I think that's what you're raising.
I
'cause
think that's a good.
what I'm looking at right now is on the canopy solar, the roof-mounted solar. Those systems are going in today without us regulating them through this bylaw. They're going in through traditional reviews. I'm looking at Ryan here. Are there concerns about what has been going in to date on the roofs from a fire and safety perspective?
Nope, we've had installations, both residential and commercial, that we go and have review for between myself and the building commission and the electrical inspector as well. My concerns or my authority relies on the setbacks for firefighting, specifically written in the code that we have to have certain amount of space for us to be able to lay our ladders on the rooftop based on the amount of space on the plane of the roof. It's got to be, if it's below 33%, you can have X amount of space at the ridge and from the gutter to the eaves to the ridge. If it's between 33 and 66, it gets very into the weeds, but there's a lot of regulation on how much energy you can produce based on the area of the plane of the rooftop, okay? We have been doing that right along for review and permitting, and gone back and forth with most of the companies now have been working in town for many years, doing these installations. A lot of times they come with not only the rooftop solar residentially, but also battery installations as well, both interior and exterior. The code allows for up to 40 kilowatt hours inside a home and up 80 outside a home. So there's a lot of energy there, but I would also recommend and say, I happen to drive an electric vehicle myself that has a 75 kilowatt hour battery also, and you don't need a permit to park it in the garage. So the energy that may be in an EV is going to be probably 5 times as much as what we're talking about for these battery installations. And again, I say we do regularly review and inspect all of these installations as well. So it's not totally foreign to us. We're just talking about a larger scale. So if we're discussing sizes and so forth, it can get a little bit confusing about kilowatt hours versus, it's basically just talking about how much power density we're talking about.
So I think I'd like to see us add a line in here of something smaller than best tier 1 that would cover
Right.
all of these concurrent conventional uses
Okay.
and be able to show whys across for that. I like seeing the whys for the canopy roof-mounted solar, because I don't think we need to get in the business of doing special permits for every one of those. And I think there's a one-to-one mapping between the solar on the roof and the battery in the garage for the new EV cars.
But this, I think there's a distinction, because this is for small clean energy infrastructures, facilities, right? So this is not residential. So I think we probably have that referenced in the code for residential. For like, if you're gonna put solar on your roof, it's different than what we're addressing here, I think.
And maybe we do need something, I'm not sure, but we have it in the use table today. So maybe we need it elsewhere, since I think we're pointing out maybe a,
Yeah, this is more, I think, commercial versus
That's the intent.
residential. Correct. So I don't wanna get too low down in the weeds.
I think Kelly.
Yeah, I think, so my only concern with further differentiating those best tiers is that those were developed by the Department of Energy Resources with extensive stakeholder input from fire departments, manufacturers, installers. Like, and there's been a lot of input in creating those. I don't understand all of the technology behind them, but those tiers were kind of prescribed by DOER. So I'm a little reluctant to
Okay.
Yeah.
add another tier or
I
subcategorization.
believe all these things that we're
Because I
talking
think
about,
that-
like the Tesla Powerwall and all that, they're too small and they're exempt from the current regulations now.
So what we did say on page 35, and this was a note from DOER, is that BESS with a capacity of 100 megawatt hours or greater will be under the jurisdiction of the Energy Facilities Siting Board. So anything lower than that is probably considered like the Tesla Powerwall kind of level of installation.
So is this now gonna this is going to pick up all of these?
I think that's why
Home
DOER
installations.
recommends that those be allowed by right. That tier 1 installations be allowed by right, because you're then not subjecting
Okay,
those smaller home installations to additional.
so it's not just commercial.
Thanks. That was gonna be my point, is if you change the regulation from by right to a permit, then I personally think it makes sense to then change the tiers. But as Kelly pointed out, the tiers were recommended DOER, but also they recommended a Y for by right. So that's, I think they're relevant, so consider them together would be my recommendation and request. Thanks.
Hearing the fire department and the electrical inspector and the National Fire Code and the electrical code, it looks like they've done a lot of work to protect these folks in this area, so I think it's a matter of right, it'd be fine.
On tier 1,
Yeah,
as well as rooftop solar.
yeah. I think there's a lot of eyes on it as it is.
Yeah.
Don't need to load us down with them, you know?
Agree, I'm good. Are there any other areas, Kelly?
No, I think the main thing to note is that even a BESS tier 1 is still going to go through the comprehensive permit process. It's just allowed by right. So it will still have the reviews. It just won't be part of a hearing by the planning board.
But on the tier 2,
Go up to the microphone.
come up to the mic.
Thank you.
And we did read your letter.
You did.
Name and address.
I'm Joanne Lund, 43 Hilder Street. And I sent a letter for the last meeting about a solicitation that we got from a company called Sustainable Strategies, who wants to lease our property that's across the street near the power line. So it's not near a house, and it actually isn't near, it's in a residential area, but it's not really near any houses. And I want to thank you very much for just doing all this work to make it possible to, control some of these things. But I am a little bit concerned about this. If we don't pass this, these zoning laws at town meeting, would somebody just be able to come and rent this property and put in whatever they wanted? I mean, are there enough laws out there to
I think the
cover
state,
it?
well, I think the state has standards, so.
Okay.
What we're trying to do is put our own kind of stamp on it at the local level.
Yep.
But if we don't have a local version of it, it would just default to the state.
I see, and you want to make it a little bit more restrictive than the state?
We want to put it into the Westford process for special
Right.
permitting where it's applicable.
Okay. Now, given that, I am not opposed to the battery energy storage systems, and I hope that we are able to put them in the town, because obviously they're going to be helpful in terms of saving energy for everybody. So I didn't want my letter to come across as the fact that I didn't, that I was opposed to it. I'm not at all.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think your letter, for me, it just identified there are property owners already getting requests. I also want to make sure that we get something that can be passed at town meeting in October. My fear is if we don't put enough restrictions for review here, knowing the town, And knowing some of the questions I've received in the past month and a half or so, residents may vote to not approve this if we don't have enough controls to protect residents. And so that's why I'm paying a particular attention to those first 5 districts of residential, commercial, and business, because I think that's the one where everyone is very sensitive as to how close it's going to be in their backyard. So we kind of have to balance that sensitivity.
And I think for those tier 2 and tier 3 installations, you could feasibly, if it didn't overly burden the board, you could have those all be subject to a special permit by the
I
board,
think that,
instead of site plan review. I think that the tier 1 is where you're starting to verge into that territory if a homeowner wants an electric vehicle and suddenly you're requiring that they.
yeah, and I'm fine with the
So-
tier 1 as
Yeah.
well as with the roof-mounted, canopy-mounted solar panels.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so we could change tier 2 to site plan, or not site plan review, it'd be for special.
Special permit,
Yeah.
yes.
For residential, for business or commercial as well, or would those stay as?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would do that because they abut
Okay, yes.
residential areas. The industrial parcels are much larger and more remote.
This is really helpful, thank you.
Any other questions, concerns tonight? Ryan?
I don't think so. This has
Okay.
been, good. Thank you for that.
I just have a vocabulary question.
Okay.
So on page 27, I think this, on the right, there's a comment saying, based on discussion at the July 27th hearing, the word secured was changed to safed. I'm just thinking, would it make more sense if we said made safe versus safed?
Yes.
I just don't, I picture some future people on the board saying, oh, they must have been saved or something, so, yeah.
Yeah, well, just, I think that's what I said, instead of, it said made secure, and I was like, I didn't know how you would secure this, it's make it safe. So. Do we want to continue this to 14 September?
You can look at one
Good for
final
you, Kelly?
version
Yeah, I can-
before
I can-
closing the hearing, just to make sure we've captured all your comments.
Sure. I think. Tom, anything else?
No, good.
Okay, can I get a motion to continue the discussion of PB 2612 to 14th of December, 14th of September,
So moved.
In this room.
In this room.
Yeah.
in this room, 7 PM.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
We'll get a cleaned up version to you shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joe, do we want, I think some of our participants are, for the next items, are outside.
So other questions? Discussion too, as far as specific. This is very general.
Yeah, yeah. So of course, if there's a site-specific one. Right. And then Joe, Jeff will make sure that the fire department addresses that there are here.
Okay, so if you have any more questions about stuff, so just go to that.
All right, so the next 2 items here are to discuss Kinlock Drive. Just, we're going to keep this separate. The first item is simply to discuss with the applicant relative to PB 2510, which was the definitive subdivision and stormwater management permits that we granted last year for Kinlock Drive, and to discuss right now what is an issue with a disturbance on that property in excess of the limits approved by this board. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe to provide the summary input.
Sure, just to try to summarize briefly, so it was brought to our attention that there was some additional work getting done out on the property over and above what was approved for the most recent approval for the board back last year, 2025. And from there, we conducted a visit of the property, reviewed aerial imagery, discussed it with our engineering department, and at that point, reached out to the applicant to try to get an explanation of, what exactly happened as this went over and above what the board had granted approval for last year. At that point, we had asked them to come in at the June meeting. They requested additional time to be able to submit materials to the engineering department for their review to essentially identify if there was an issue for stormwater, and if so, how they would be able to mitigate that. So the engineering department did review the materials presented, which essentially is to create a detention pond to mitigate the additional stormwater impacts. At a high-level review of it, the engineering department feels like it could work. The question would be, based on the proposed location of the basin, it would require a waiver from this board in terms of its setback from the property line. So, without going further into it, they would want to know, would the board want to look at a waiver of that requirement or not? I think it'd also be a question of, if and when that was built, is it a temporary measure or is it a permanent item to be put in place? So, I don't know if you want anything else or if you want to turn it to the applicant at this point.
I guess maybe we should have the applicant speak to that, what the proposal is, and their argument for the waiver.
Yeah, Mark Slager from Allen Engineering. I came up with a solution that I guess I originally viewed as a temporary solution. As you know, the lower part of Lot 2 is still undeveloped, and the developer is still working on some house plans and house designs, and I figured I'd just come up with a temporary solution showing a detention basin at the bottom of the lawn area that was created. And then ultimately, when the lower part of Lot 2 is developed, we could put a more permanent solution down in that location. If the board is not comfortable with that solution, we can obviously make an alternative location for whatever mitigation needs to be done. It was just something that I thought was a nice, quick and simple solution with the least amount of disturbance. But if the board feels it's better appropriate, more appropriate down in another location, we don't have an issue with that.
And Mr. Chair, Jonathan Silverstein for the applicant. I think as a preliminary matter, the applicant recognizes that they should have come in before doing this clearing. I think the intent is to build something there, whether it's a garage as part of the house lot or an alternative location for the house itself, or as a separate lot. My understanding is there was a lot of sort of debris, yard waste, and scrub vegetation. They wanted to clean it up and make it look nicer, but we certainly recognize should have come in first. So just wanted to put that on the record, that we recognize that we did things in reverse order from what it should have been done, so wanted to acknowledge that.
We open up to the board. Joan, do you have questions?
Appreciate the acknowledgement. I guess the question is, again, why? It seems like this keeps happening in Westford. We approve a site plan and something different develops. It's a trend that I'm very concerned about for the residents of this town. It's a trend that I think does not really take into account all of the work that the staff puts into reviewing all these packages as well as this board. So, you know, I frankly am very annoyed at this whole situation. I think engineering has, I'm very concerned about the stormwater, you know, engineering, reading their comments, they have some serious concerns. I absolutely have a huge concern, which we have spoken about on other projects, about a detention basin not being in the proper setback. That's a big problem for neighbors. It's not fair to neighbors. So I think this needs a lot more work. I think the stormwater does need to be revisited and, you know, fully reviewed by the town. And I think we have to look at our waivers that were granted, because we granted waivers based on a 2-lot subdivision. So now if we're talking about a 3rd lot, different ballgame here. So I think, you know, we need a little more information, and it needs to be developed a little more.
So I'm happy to address anything the board wants me to. I was trying to sort of speak first to this issue, being mindful of the chair's comments. You know, at the appropriate time, I'm certainly comfortable speaking to the waivers that were granted, and why I think they're still warranted for a 3-lot subdivision, but I don't know if this is the right time to get into that.
The issue I have is that a year ago, I was not on the board 7, 8 years ago when this was originally presented, but I was here last year when we took back the order from the courts, and we dealt with some minor modifications, and we gave the current approval for PB 2510. At that time, I really feel now we were misled, because the whole tone of that presentation and the way the waivers were written was that the language said that the board granted the waiver with the finding that Kinlock Drive will remain a private way owned and maintained by a homeowners association and serving only 2 lots. I never remember any discussion that this would be 3 lots. We questioned deeply the somewhat unconventional layout of Lot 2 spread across 2 portions with a small piece connecting them. So I personally feel very misled, because I voted for that waiver with the understanding it was 2 lots. I do recognize there was a lot of angst by the abutters, and at this time, with the actions that have taken place, there's no way to replace the trees. Approving a 3rd lot is not a guarantee. And seriously, I think we were trying to develop some trust between the 3 different parties here: the town, the planning board, the town staff, the applicant, as well as the abutters. And I know that there was an awful lot of consternation, animosity between the applicant and the abutters. I know that. And we wrote some of our waivers in recognition of that. But now at this point, these actions make it extremely hard for me to trust and try to put forth recommendations that I can stand up to the abutters and say, this is in the best interest of everybody, because you violated my trust, to be quite frank. I'd like to say we could call this the circle of trust, but, you know, Robert De Niro and Ben Stiller have taken that term. But it's really important here. We've got 3 distinct parties on this circle that need to be trying to trust one another. And this has just blown it up in my mind. And so I know we have to talk about temporary, but quite frankly, we're going to have to talk about this kind of now and then decide what we do later, because I don't want to see us tearing up something that we put in temporarily. But now, we've also really violated the trust of those abutters by removing all of those trees. And for me, when I voted on those waivers, the presence of those trees on the front portion of Lot 2 was important. We dealt with the technical requirements for stormwater management with the lot, but at the same time, those trees provided a buffer for many of the abutters. I know they were not happy about the presence of the common drive going in, but the trees did do something to mitigate, and we've lost that ability now. I don't know how to say it otherwise.
This additional clearing was done last fall, and it was done in conjunction with,
No.
That's not, I don't think that's true, Mark. I mean, that's not what I was led by Joe.
we're talking the clearing here.
Talking about
No.
right there, that clearing right there,
That clearing right there.
was done in the
If
spring.
you're trying to say, you can stand up at the microphone, okay, but keep the
Yeah, I
order.
would appreciate if we could speak on
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Yes.
there was some clearing done along the side, and there was some clearing done along here, probably in 2 different phases. But along here, there was some clearing done, and a lot of it was scrub brush, and there was some yard waste in there, and there was some debris left over from the farm that used to be there before,
All
so.
the large trees removed at that time?
I think there were a couple of large trees that were removed. But the other thing that I'd like to point out is the very first approval of the 2-lot subdivision showed a drainage swale going down in here and showed this entire lot being cleared. When we came back for an amendment, we abandoned that drainage system and put the pipe drainage system in the road. So when the thought came up about clearing this, we really didn't give it too much of an extra thought because it had already been approved in the prior plan. The one thing that was the oversight was the fact that the new stormwater permit that was approved last fall assumed that this wasn't going to be cleared. So originally it was going to be cleared, then it wasn't going to be cleared, and then ultimately it did get cleared.
Unfortunately, I think last year, the board that was present in June, Mike, I don't think you weren't present for were you present, Darren, for the original one in 17?
No.
So we had maybe 1, 2 members. So for me, that was never a consideration. What I saw was a tree buffer in addition to the appropriate stormwater management elements protecting the site. And I recognize I also had angry abutters still protesting the second home, but, you know, my obligation was to make the approval with the appropriate adjustments and the waivers based upon the new information and the remand back from the Corps. I never envisioned clearing of Lot 2, and that is not present in last year's decision. It clearly stated that there would be only 2 lots built, and that was the entire tenor, I think, of our discussions. And so we went to this spring, and all of a sudden, we got reports of somebody clearing trees, informing the butters that, oh, we're going to be building a 3rd lot.
So I do want to speak to that. I've spoken with my clients. We're aware of that allegation. We don't know who supposedly said that, but it was not coming from the applicant or anyone authorized to speak on behalf of the applicant. If it was said, it wasn't said by anyone on the applicant team. So I want to be really clear about that. I also, and I appreciate your concerns. I'm obviously we're here, you know, hat in hand. We're not arguing that we shouldn't have done it differently. I do think it's important to remember that the 2 approvals we got are stormwater management, and as you said, Mr. Chair, if we satisfy the stormwater handbook standards, that's our obligation to get stormwater management approval and subdivision approval. And subdivision approval, subdivision review is by statute supposed to be about sufficiency and safety of access and utilities, not about what happens on a lot. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about what we can do to mitigate what was done. I hear you on that. But I do think it's important to remember the purview of the applications before the board. Subdivision approval is not supposed to look at what happens on individual lots. It's supposed to look at the safety and adequacy of access and utilities. So I would just ask the board to be mindful of those facts. That being said, we had a stormwater management permit that showed this as not being cleared, and it was cleared. And that's our error, and we're open to mitigating and resolving that issue in any way that makes the board comfortable and hopefully reinstill some of the trust that that may have been lost in the process.
Any other comments, questions from the board? I'll open it up to the audience if they have questions on this part of the topic.
Jack?
They're looking for a comment, Jack.
Oh, Hi, John Conway, 66 Main Street. I am not one of the angry abutters. I own the right-of-way and they have easement rights. I'm not angry about things, I just feel that the words you guys are using, and as you as well, Joanne, about trust. These individuals, from the beginning of time, have been untrustworthy to the neighborhood. That's what they do, that's who they are. They are trying to create
I
this.
object. Seriously.
Yes,
Mr.
not yet
Chair.
speaking, I'm speaking,
You're
Dave.
gonna let him abuse me like this?
Yeah, no, I'm not You abusing know you. me.
Whoa, discussion to the
Let me
board.
speak, Dave, how about that?
Hey,
How about
hey,
you let
hey,
me
hey,
speak?
you talk to the board, not to anyone in the
Okay,
audience.
well, how about you control him then? Thank you.
He's not calling out by name, so I'm,
Please.
It's pretty obvious, Mr. Chair. I think we can speak about
Shouldn't be a person.
the regulations without making personal attacks
I'm
on
not
people's
making a
integrity.
personal, am I able to
It
speak?
sure
or not?
sounded like a personal attack to me.
Am I able to speak or not?
yes, but please be respectful of the people and speak to the issues and speak to the point at hand, not
Fair.
attack people.
Thank you. I apologize if I offended the board. My observation of developers in general is that they create an aura.
Let's speak to the topic and not make.
I am speaking, I mean, is this the public hearing or is
Yes.
this them knocking down all the trees? Which one is this meeting?
This is talking about knocking down the trees.
Okay.
And it's not a public hearing, it's a general
This
business
is just
item.
general
So
business.
we're giving you the ability to speak on this. And what you would propose or what you'd like to see done as a resolution to the extra clearing that has been done.
Specifically to this, not a generalization.
Specifically, we're revisiting the special permit that we granted back in 2025.
I was here, and I sat through the meeting, and I didn't object to it, because I trusted the individuals that they were gonna do what you guys agreed and allowed them to do, the waiver that you allowed. And what they did is what you've seen. They don't check with people, they don't communicate what they're doing, they just do it. The board needs to hold them accountable for their actions. It's that simple. The waivers that are granted impact the neighborhood. They impact the center of town. There is a master plan that comments about protecting the history of the center of town. Live up to that. And some of the actions that they've done, and I'll get into more of that when we get into the public hearing part, but just going down and clearing trees, and these individuals, and yes, I will speak directly to this individual, they've been in this business a long time. They don't do things by chance. They're very good at what they do. They are deliberate in their actions. They have a supreme lawyer here who used to represent municipalities, probably like 200 of them. He knows what he's doing. This gentleman spoke earlier about other developments that you're going through. This is not their first rodeo. They've been through this before. And for them to say, we didn't know we were cutting down trees is
I will be respectful there and leave it at that. But that is where you can't play both sides of the fence.
Let me ask you this, since the trees have been cleared, have there been any stormwater runoff issues?
Yes.
Observed?
So the back of my property, at the end of that's topic for the next meeting, but the curbing that they put in, which now prevents me from accessing my property. I have a right to use the right-of-way. I can no longer drive a vehicle over it based on the size of the curbing. I had my granddaughter visiting and she had to pick up the carriage. My daughter had to pick up the carriage for the granddaughter to get over and walk up and down the right-of-way. We can use the right-of-way. And we can no longer access it from our property because of the sizing of the curbing that's there. So yes, I would say what they've done in terms of knocking down the trees and their attitude about it has been egregious.
I'm asking stormwater runoff.
Yeah, I have pictures on my phone from the last rainstorm that is ankle to shin-high water collected right by the sewer on the back edge of my property. So yes, there is stormwater that's been
Can
collected.
you point out where that would be on this drawing?
So this, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Main Street is here.
I'll just show you a picture of it. I have it on my phone. If this is Main Street here, it is right here, right along the edge. I could freeze it in the winter and skate on it. That's how much it was. And it's not on there, because this is where the curbing ends, right there, by chance. They don't have that 3-inch high curbing. I do. They put it all the way in on both sides of the road. So it's right in there. And part of my request in the next meeting is, I know there was a site visit kind of inspecting some of the observations that people have made. I want you guys just to take a walk down there and look what they've done. This is a historic center of town. And they put in Boston Road with curbs that look like they're from Robinson High School, the Robinson School. My 99-year-old mother comes to visit. I go pick her up from Monadnock Drive. We used to drive I would go down the right-of-way and drive into my backyard and have a picnic. I can't do that anymore because I can't drive over it. And if I want you guys to take a walk up and down there and you'll see it. It's egregious.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
I think the curbing was put in as part of the stormwater plan.
Yeah, the curb,
It's per plan. It was to prevent runoff from entering their property.
and just to remind the board last year voted on 2 waivers. One was the same applicant not being the fee owner, so not a substantive waiver. And the other was to allow a drainage swale in excess of 5% slope. That's it. Nothing about curbs.
I'd beg to differ. We granted a waiver from subsection 218.13, E1 and E2, page 5 of the decision, and it was to eliminate the requirement for sloped granite curb along each edge of the roadway. And there was a there was a statement, a finding, that it was based upon Kinlock Drive remaining a private way owned and maintained by the homeowners association and serving only 2 lots.
Well, and it's only serving 2 lots, Mr. Chair. Again, we're not in the public hearing yet for the 3rd lot.
I'm just saying that there was a waiver for the sloped granite curbing.
But my point is that we haven't done anything in violation of any of the waivers that you granted. We cleared land that wasn't shown to be cleared on the stormwater permit.
Correct, but
So
I
the comments from
will state for myself, I voted on that waiver based upon the language it said, it would only be 2 lots. And
I
that was the-
understand it. I'm
that
trying to
was
be
the-
mindful of you saying we're not talking about the third lot yet. When it's the right time, I will speak to that.
I understand, I'm not talking about the third lot, I'm simply talking about the fact that we were led to believe there would only be 2 lots ever. That was the tenor of last year's discussion. And that was simply talking about how we reviewed the waivers at that time and approved the special permit based upon the discussion. And this gets back to my original point about trust. I believe at this time, I was misled last year about this eventually going to become 3 lots. We were led to believe, I thought it was only 2 lots.
Okay, again, I think there's a lot more history, but
Let's continue that part for the next,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
I think we're, and if I may, Bob,
Yes.
just, what do we wanna do? Do we wanna send this back to engineering to review Mr. Schleier's plan, to move forward at that, and then see what the engineering has to say about Mr. Schleier's change, and we can just, if that's agreeable.
Well, is it temporary permit? I think we need to know what the permanent solution is gonna be. How are we gonna meet
I
this
think
forward?
that's a ways away, so if we have some rain event in the meantime, we'd like to have things
Yeah.
protected.
True, okay.
Can I ask one question then, just to that point? So for engineering's review, do we want to see something like Mr. Slager presented with the detention basin where it is? Would you want to see something that's not within the setback area? Because it gets into the waiver realm, so that's where I think the applicant would need direction on what to present to engineering for their review.
So my understanding is right now what the board, my understanding of the board's consensus is to look at this almost as erosion control as a temporary basis, which I don't think requires waivers. And a permanent plan will be approved in
I
a
think,
future meeting, but
I think that's a great point. What if we work with engineering to put up erosion control until all of this is sorted out, instead of making them build ponds that may potentially be
Is
moved?
there no erosion control in place now?
There is. Yeah.
Okay,
But still, based upon the clearing, right? Let's get engineering.
No, I agree, but I just wanted to clarify, because I thought there was some temporary erosion control in place because of this clearing.
So can I ask, does
And so
engineering,
now the question would be to engineering,
Does
what
it-
additional
right,
work would they recommend being done on a temporary basis?
I think it's a great idea.
yeah.
I will work with engineering so that we come up with a solution such that, in their opinion, no waivers will be required.
Yeah, and to that point, I like that, Mark. Joe, I want Joe and Jeff to work with engineering and you to review that to ensure that we don't need waivers.
Right.
I think we had a comment
So,
at the microphone.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Hi, Emily Byrne, 8-wheeler. I don't want to cross sides between the next hearing either, so I just wanted to say that I think, how was the public or a butter supposed to know that there was an issue of over-clearing? When, I guess what I'm trying, I came to the planning board to ask for a review. I was the one that overheard the construction workers saying they're building a bunch of houses down there. So I came by asking for the town to oversee and check in and make sure they were working according to plan. And I asked for a follow-up, and I left my contact information, and I didn't hear back. And I had no idea that there was actually an illegal activity happening against the permit. And I would have liked to have been able to be present at the earlier hearings when this was initially brought up.
Just so you know, there wasn't another hearing before this. Well,
the last hearing was in June of 2025.
That's what the meeting packet said, that it was in
So we
June.
brought it in, we were gonna talk about it this past June, but we kicked it forward.
Oh,
So there wasn't any
okay, so
hearing.
nothing
What you saw in
happened.
the letter was a request to have
Regardless,
the
I just
meeting.
want to be informed of what's happening on this project.
You-
I don't know how to ask, I don't know how to make that happen.
That was a letter you saw that requested a meeting 15th of June, and that has been postponed until tonight at the request of the applicant working with the town and town engineering to do some review on the temporary work being planned.
Okay.
So I think, that's what
Like,
you're
I guess my
probably saying.
ask is just, this is a very contentious topic, and I think I asked last year for the same thing, because I wasn't aware that there was even a hearing last year.
You can apply online to
Yeah.
have the agendas forwarded.
Yeah.
So if you go
Automatically.
online, go to the website and ask for the agenda for any board that you want, and every week will be forwarded to you. So you can get the planning board agenda that's gonna outline.
I guess I'd also like to make sure that if an abutter goes to the town to ask for oversight and something is found, I think it's right
Yeah.
to follow up with the abutter,
Yeah,
right?
I
I just
totally
think,
agree.
you know, I mean, it's not the
Who did you
board's
speak-
comment, but I
At
just
the
would
time,
love.
who did you speak with?
It was with me,
Okay.
so.
And I
my
mean, I don't mean,
apologies.
I'm not looking to put you on the spot, I just want to be kept informed, because there's a lot happening at the site that we're trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean,
And so,
we
you
were
know,
waiting on engineering to follow up and find out if the applicant's proposal was going to pass muster.
and I guess
The
that's like
proposal
my.
was something that required the planning board's review.
Yeah, but I think that that's where my other point is that they did something that wasn't permitted, and now the proposal is to be folded into a future permit. What's the fix?
No, we have two things happening here. We are working on a fix, a temporary fix, and that's what you're hearing discussed right now.
So why wouldn't the fix to clearing be to reforest the land? To put more trees back to what they cleared that they shouldn't have cleared?
I can answer that.
Dave?
Dave Guthrie, the applicant, we reforested, but we'll be back to ask to clear it again under the stormwater management permit, which is our right because we put an ADU there, if this remotes the two-lot subdivision. 3-car garage with up to 800 square feet of ADU. So we'd want that cleared. So we'd be back under the stormwater management permit to ask to have it cleared. We'd show that we could contain the water and we'd move forward. So we can reforest, we'll just be taking it down.
We're
The
trying to-
ADU is by right.
We're trying to put together a solution that addresses the current issue
Yeah,
without having to be disturbed again.
right, but there's no ADU on, I mean, that's a whole other, right? I mean, that you're just
Mr.
like.
Chair, if you
Yes.
really want to peel the onion back, Lot 2 is going to have a single-family house. That whole property that remains without a house now is Lot 2. Correct?
We haven't got into that yet. That's next discussion.
It is Lot 2. They're all, Lot 2 is low and contiguous all the way up high. We have the right to put a house on Lot 2. The clearing's a separate issue. The clearing requires an amendment to the stormwater management.
But if
Guilty
you
of
were to
that,
put
we
a house
apologize.
on the north side of Lot 2,
You need to talk to the board. Okay,
if they were to put a house on the north side of Lot 2, that would need a different minor modification to the plan, because the house proposed and approved last year was on the south side of Lot 2, at the far end. That's it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
I'm way beyond, this is not my point at all. I
I speak to the reforesting, Mr. Chair, that if we reforest, we'd be back in.
I understand.
Okay, and so what's the consequence for disregarding the board's direction? Like, how are we holding anybody accountable? The board previously stated that this is occurring elsewhere in town, and I'm in a butter and I'm aware of this, and nothing seems to be happening. They're literally telling me they're
I'm
gonna
not
do
sure
it
we're done
anyway.
with this yet, to
Okay.
be honest.
Is there a
We're
fine? There should be
discussing what
monies.
the mitigation is.
Yes, a lot of it. You can't. That's what I have to say on that.
I would say we are involved.
Please come to the mic if you would.
Dave Guthrie out there. We respect not only mitigation to resolve the drainage, we expect the repercussions.
Just, John Conway again. I will submit these photos of the stormwater process working.
Okay, could you,
Who do I send them to?
would you please work with Jeff, I'm not, with Joe.
Jeff, okay. But I mean,
Get
this
those
is,
submitted.
this is from June 18th storm.
That's fine.
Completely flooded
That's fine.
on my property.
So I think we have direction to work with town engineering and Mark and Joe to address the mitigation for a temporary stormwater management fix, as well as to ensure that no waivers are being required. Do we want to continue this discussion to the 14th of September? Is that good?
Some engineering.
That's fine.
Yes, we need to.
I'm looking for the applicant to
Sure,
make
that
sure.
works for me.
May I also speak to the fact that this is performance-based drainage. So if it is in fact not functioning as originally proposed by Mark and reviewed by town engineer, it's going to have to be modified. It's performance-based drainage.
Another comment, question?
Yes, I just have a quick question.
Please,
I am
name and address.
Lisa Kropanik at 6 Wheeler Lane. I just have a question. On all the plans that we see on Lot 2, I believe the house is situated like behind Lot 1. It's not actually on the, I believe it would be the south side of the lot. I believe that
It
the
still is.
plans. Okay, yeah, so if we scroll down, so according to the plans, that Lot 2, the house is actually over there. I just wanted to make that point that that is where the proposed house is. It's not actually across from my house, which is 6 Wheeler Lane, so I'm directly across from Lot 2. So the proposed house is
Lot 2
over
is
there.
an odd-shaped lot.
Yes, but the
It's
house
wrapped
is over
around-
there on the plans, is that not correct?
That's,
Okay.
at the present time, correct.
Okay.
And we can't tell them where to put the house on Lot 2.
Okay, so would they have to provide new plans to have the plan, move the house over there? I mean.
I'm not sure that's what we're
see, 'cause
discussing.
we-
We're-
Okay, so I just wanted to say,
we're
while we
gonna
were
go to
talking
the next
about
hearing
this
and
whole
discuss
Lot 2
that.
and the clearing, I just figured I'd
Okay.
throw that out there.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, and I think Mr. Bonifant just said this, again, subdivision control deals with access to lots, not where a house is built on a lot, what landscaping is put on a lot. Case law is very clear, as Mr. Bonifant just said. That is not the subject of the planning board's purview under subdivision control, where on a lot a house is located. It was part of the stormwater management permit.
Where it could not be located.
Well, where it was proposed to be located, but it can be located anywhere as long as we comply with the stormwater management standards, which we certainly will. So I just wanted to be clear because I think people think they see a subdivision plan, they see an illustrative location of the house, and they think that that is part of the subdivision approval. And that's not the case as a matter of law.
If I may, the stormwater management speaks to the total impervious and the type of pervious that you have. And that's what the issue is here. The clearing versus the lawn. And does it affect the drainage negligibly or substantially? And that's what Mark is working with, town engineer to review. So if I may, if we show where the house is or isn't on our lot, it's a guess on our part because we don't have a house design yet. But the stormwater management permit, not the planning board approval, would regulate the impervious and the type of pervious.
So can I add though, if not to belabor the point, but the stormwater is affected by the amount of driveway you have.
Correct.
So if you don't put the house there, if you put it somewhere else, that does change the stormwater, so.
Correct.
That is.
We'd have to modify.
Right,
Yep, whether it be the number's greater or less,
Right.
we'd have to modify.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to be really clear. This is relevant to the stormwater management permit. It's not relevant to subdivision approval.
Okay. Can I get a motion to continue the discussion of PB 2510 to the 14th September 2026 meeting in this room at 7 p.m.?
so moved.
Second.
All,
May I ask, does the board want to visit the site?
listen, let me do this.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a
I
good
didn't know if
point.
that'd be part.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
To that point, can we set up a site visit, Joe?
Sure, I'd be happy to set us
For
a
the
site
board?
visit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to PB 2609, definitive subdivision stormwater management permit for Kinlock Drive. Can I have a motion to waive the reading of the public notice?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Can I get a motion to open public hearing for PB 2609, Kinlock Drive?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Joe?
I think it's already been alluded to, Mr. Chair. You have a request to modify, to add an additional lot. This kind of the area you see on here that was all part of Lot 2 would become Lot 2 and Lot 3. Pull up the plan in a moment. It would also add a roof drain infiltration system to accommodate the new proposed dwelling on what would be Lot 3. I don't know if, Mark, you have any other details you want to go into on the plan, or I don't know if Attorney Silverstein has anything you'd like to go into as part of the request?
With the board's permission, I'd like to just sort of set the table a little bit. I wasn't at the hearing a year ago that you're alluding to, so I don't know what was or was not discussed. What I will say is this. It's important to go a little bit further back. The applicants bought 26 acres of land. That 26 acres had been retained by Mrs. Agnew when she sold the acre and a half in front. And she reserved a right-of-way for all purposes for which a road may be used in the town of Westford to reach 26 plus acres of land. When the applicants bought that land, their intent all along was to pursue 3 house lots, including the existing house at the time. They approached the Conservation Commission. They voluntarily donated 20 acres of land contiguous, not as a condition of any approval, not as a requirement of anything. 20 plus acres of land contiguous with town conservation land, creating trail connections, extremely valuable to the town. It was explicitly the discussion at the time with the Conservation Commission that they were retaining 6 acres for 3 house lots. Totally compliant house lots. Their mistake, apparently, was that they gave away the 20 acres before they came to the planning board. And during the planning board proceedings, they were forced to accept 2 lots. Fine. The Conways appealed. The approval was upheld in the court. There was it came back to this board for some modifications and a few waivers. Again, I wasn't here, but if, the board had the impression that it was going to be 2 lots and only 2 lots and no one would ever ask for a third, I apologize for that impression. But the fact is, these are zoning compliant lots, and I would submit that if it's safe and adequate to not have sloped granite curbing to serve 2 lots, I submit it's safe and adequate to serve 3 lots. And if it's better not to have extra impervious surface because we're worried about stormwater by having sidewalks on both sides of the street for 2 lots, I think it's just as safe for 3 lots. I appreciate the trust concern and what you felt you were voting on, and there's probably nothing I can say to change that. But what I would ask the board is to look at the standards by which the board's supposed to make these determinations. We can put in the granite curbing, we can put in the sidewalks, if that's really what the planning board wants, for us to not have these waivers and pave more of the site, we can do that. And it, at the end of the day, would probably make, I don't want to speak for my client, but it would probably still make it worth it with the extra lot. The question is that in the public interest? Neighbors having to look at someone else's house, that's not the purpose of subdivision control. Neighbors feeling like, you know, there should only be 2 houses on an easement that goes over the property, when the easement was specifically reserved for 26 acres. The notion that any judge would find that it's unreasonable to have 3 houses served by a right-of-way reserved by the original grantor to reach 26 plus acres of land, I don't think any judge is going to find that. So I would just ask the board, put us through the paces, make sure this stormwater works, make sure that we're, meeting the intent of the subdivision rules and regulations. But when you're deciding whether to grant waivers to create a 3rd lot, or are going to force us to give up those waivers in order to get the 3rd lot, to make it more by right, I guess just think about what you think is actually in the public interest. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that my client's not looking to build another house in order to address the Commonwealth's housing needs. But I do think the board should consider the fact that we're proposing a lot of more than an acre that's fully zoning compliant on a constructed road that's completely safe and adequate for the intended use. And I do think that's in the public interest. We need more housing. Neighbors might not want housing in their backyard. They always want to pull the ladder up after them. That's understandable. I could write the script for every single public hearing I represent an applicant of what the neighbors will say. I get it. But that's not the purpose of subdivision control. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mark so he can walk you through the plan.
We're not proposing any changes to the construction of the roadway. The only thing that's being proposed is dividing lots 2 into lot 2 and 3. If you'll notice the configuration of the roadway and the 3 lots, it's pretty much what was originally proposed back before we were forced to go back to a 3-lot subdivision. So there really isn't any significant change. We're not proposing any changes from what was approved last fall on the latest approvals. The only modification would be to the stormwater management permit, which would require that the houses on lots 2 and 3 would have roof drain systems to accommodate the additional impervious that's being generated on lot 3. And that's the only change. Construction standards are all pretty much what was approved, or all identical to what was approved.
Mark, am I correct that no waivers required because there's no, this plan doesn't show a detention basin within 30 feet of the property line?
Correct. There's no waivers on this plan that haven't already been approved.
Is that everything?
That's it? Yeah.
Joe, report from town staff?
There's really not much else to add, Mr. Chair. To Attorney Silverstein's point, the board, with the additional lot is welcome to revisit any waivers from the past, to review those and see if you feel differently, since a number of them were granted, noting that it was for the additional residence. I would note some of the town staff comments, such as the fire chief indicating so long as the proposed right-of-way design is not changing, he doesn't feel as though this additional lot would have any impact. this is something for your consideration. There were some comments from engineering as well that we need some additional details on the stormwater. Again, it's been kind of, working through what do we have in terms of the solution for the current stormwater issues, I guess, if you will, from the additional clearing versus what the proposed final condition will be, and trying to get everything to coalesce together. And otherwise, it was fairly standard comments, I think, from the Board of Health in terms of the septic system design and the information they would need. So there's really no surprises, I guess, in terms of town staff comments. But just want the board to be aware of that as you're going through the different waivers and seeing, is there anything that you would want to reconsider? Sounded like the board's interested in a site visit, so it might be in your interest to keep the proposal in your mind as well, and conducting the site visit on top of the stormwater mitigation.
Kind of with the board. John?
Yeah, I mean, looking at this proposal for Lot 3, I do have some concerns with the grading and the runoff. So I would ask, again, I know you have to do a complete stormwater design, and that would have to be looked at by engineering, but some of these slopes, I am concerned that the water's gonna run into the neighbors. And I did see the issue again, the issue about the detention basin not being 30 feet. Again, don't know if that's real, not real, temporary, permanent, but I think that would be a very big issue. And as I think Bob has alluded to, we do need to probably, for our own edification, need to look at all the waivers and, because again, they were based on 2. And I do recall at one of the hearing meetings, one of the residents did ask specifically, is there an intent to build a 3rd home here at any time? And the answer given is, we would have to go through another site plan approval, is the correct, obviously, answer, so.
Which is exactly what we're doing, which is very different from saying, no, we'll never ask.
Right. So, and appreciate your comments, but again, what serves the community, something that's more affordable would be obviously something that would better serve the community.
Sure. And just to clarify, the detention basin within 30 feet is not part of this plan in front of me.
Right.
So just wanted to make sure
Right.
that was clear.
Right.
Anything else, Joe?
That's it, right there.
Mike?
I don't have anything.
Darren?
No, I would just ask if town council can, with staff, look at the prior conditions and make sure, there obviously reference the 2 houses, but make sure there's nothing in there that would prevent this, but I don't think there is. And then, of course, review by engineering with drainage is very important.
Tom? The one question I have, Mark, is, and Joe, for engineering, is the slope of the grading for Lot 3 now? Is the slope of that within our recommended guidelines for the severity? Because it does seem to be sloping off fairly steeply towards the back of the Conways, as opposed to the back of the house is sloped more gradual towards the Pettits. Just want to understand what that slope is.
I mean, that's basically just a concept of what could be built there. It's not the actual house that's gonna be built. We don't know what the shape and size of the house is that's gonna go there, but I just showed that on there to show basically the limit of the clearing, approximate location where the driveway could be located, where the septic system is. Once the septic system's designed and the final house is designed, there'll be a subsequent grading plan that has to go to the building department for approval. And it has to go to engineering for review to show that it conforms to the stormwater management permit. But this is just a design to show what could be built there. There will be some tweaking for the grading with concern for grading onto, directing water onto someone else's property. You can see to the right of the septic system, once a final design is done, it'll show a swale, possibly a wall, supporting the septic system just to prevent any runoff from going onto the Conway
That
property.
was gonna be my question, was I didn't see a swale there, I saw a riprap swale
Yeah.
to the other side.
That'll be more detailed during the septic system approval, which will also be carried forward onto the plan that will be submitted to the engineering department for review.
So Joe, that would need to be captured in conditions, the potential for that swale.
If I may, Mr. Chair, as the applicant, I believe stormwater management gives you a layer of protection there because we're not allowed to discharge on an abutters property through the stormwater management program.
Yeah.
Which the town engineer does review the stormwater management for every lot, unlike yourself who doesn't. They do on your behalf, so you are protected in the sense that we can't discharge onto the neighbor's yard. If it is happening now, again, it's performative-based drainage, so we're gonna have to modify it.
Okay. I'm gonna open up to the audience. As always, please state your name and your address.
John Conway, 66 Main Street. I have a couple of points I want to make, but first I want to, given that I believe the attorney for the applicants addressed the history, and as he did so, he's referring to speaker notes on his laptop. I don't have to refer to the speaker notes because I lived it. And there is more history than what he outlined. The history actually started when the applicants proposed to buy the land in the community. Those of us gathered here raised the same amount of money and had certified bank statements that would cash it all in the town, the selectmen, based on some of the discussions that were taking place. I don't want to, at the time it was, a midnight conversation in the hallway that took place. But nonetheless, the select board at that particular time sided with the developers over the community. But we had an equal proposal, cash-based, $750,000. So this is something that is emotional for us, and it is also part of the history that we, at the very beginning of the process, offered an offer that's still, I'm sure it's somewhere documented, that we had an offer equal to what the developers were proposing. And so that's part of the reason why this has been, it's been an uphill battle for everyone. It's not something I want to do, but it's something I feel I have to protect my land, my property, my family. And this is, I've lived there over 30 years. So that as a backdrop, and I will go back to my original statements. I have 4 points. 1, I'm opposed to the proposal for a third development. 2, I request that the board does do a site visit so some of my comments earlier have some context and perspective. I also would ask that Joe and the team do pull some permits. We know, we have video evidence that they did put a conduit into the underground area and tried to, it stopped at lot 3, meaning that they were looking to develop the third lot and they didn't have approval for it, that are of inevitability that they did when they started clearing trees. So that's my request, that you do a site visit and that you also do pulling permits to see if they are doing what they're supposed to be doing because of the trust issue that the board has raised. The third comment, I would request that the board issue an immediate cease and desist until those things are in place. The board needs to understand what these guys are actually doing and what their intent is. There are conversations that have taken place, and you'll hear from others, are certainly that the work is on site. And I know it's not the same as talking to Dave and Chris and Mark and team, but the work is on site. We're clearly communicating. Yeah, we're building 3 houses here. That's what they were doing. They're good guys, they're working hard, they're respectful in the area. I'm not criticizing the guys doing the work, but they clearly were indicating something that they were doing work on 3 houses. And the fourth thing, Darren, I apologize for this, but I know you're a good guy, but I think you should recuse yourself from the conversations, the debate, and the discussion because of your relationship with one of the applicants. So those are my statements, observations, comments for the board to consider. The things that I mentioned earlier are kind of my general observations. I already talked to you about the curbing. That's a problem. I cannot access my property given the size and scope of the curbing. Something that when you do the walk down, you can see it. You cannot drive over that curbing onto my property. That's something that should be investigated.
Can I ask a question about that?
What's that?
Can I ask a question about that
Yes.
to you and the applicant? The curbing that's installed there now is Cape Cod berm, is that correct?
Yes.
If it was sloped granite, would it make your property more accessible?
Yes.
No, it wouldn't.
Easier to drive over sloped granite than Cape Cod berm?
Listen, I don't know the difference, honestly, I'm not a developer, I'm a writer. I would say, at the end of the day, my answer to that would be respectfully, I need to be able to access my property from the right of way. And I can't do it today. So whether it's granite or berm or whatever you want to call it, I need to be able to walk down the right of way, my grandchildren need to be able to push a carriage on it, and my grandmother, my mother, who's 99 years old, needs to be able to visit when she can, and the only way she, due to mobility limitations, it has to come through the back, she has to enter through the backyard. I have a right to use the right of way, I can't do it right now and get into my property. That needs to be looked at. The other thing, I do want to comment about the trees that were cut down, and this will be my last point. I have others, but I know it's a long night, and I think there might be more discussions on this. But when these individuals came and cut the trees, I did have a conversation with one of the applicants about certain trees that, you know, we preferred. There was one tree, a 200-year-old, that's quoted by Ellen Hardy, of all people, in the oral history of Westford Center, called an antique lilac. It's been there for 200 years. It's in the island area. 200 years, a tree. It's a little shrub. It wasn't even really that good looking, but nonetheless, it was something that had been there and sustained weather and all this other stuff. These guys cut it down in 8 seconds.
On their property?
No, it's on my property, it'd be the right of way. It would be in the jointly
But the
owned
right
by
of way?
Lisa and us. So in 8 seconds, and now that they've kind of finished it, it was obvious that they didn't really need to do it. But why did they do it? Because they could. Because they had a waiver that gives them this empowerment, and they just do it because it's easier. It becomes more expensive if you work your way around it. That's a fact.
I understand, okay.
The other thing that you have to consider is just overall safety. So before they start working on a third house, why don't you see what happens when 2 houses are there? Because there is a bus stop. There are young kids that walk down the street. There is a crosswalk. There is the rodent bush across the street. As it is now, these guys don't pay for police details when they deliver their big trucks. And there's documented calls to the police department where they've had to come and retrieve, no, that's an issue. That they don't, the safety of the development, okay, I can see from the reaction, you're basically saying, okay, it's a.
So on that one, John, I would ask that you work with Joe and Jeff.
No, but I mean, it's a speaking to, the larger issue is safety.
I understand
It's a
that.
bus stop, when you get more vehicles coming up and down the road, you've got trash, you got recycling, when they push snow, it's gonna go on my property, the recycling's gonna go on my property, the barrels that are gonna be strewn about are gonna go on my property. They don't have the bandwidth to put it on their own property. So that's it, there's more to say. I know you're busy, and I don't want to keep people here all night, but thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate, you know, some consideration as you go through decision-making on this, that you evaluate the full picture of what this really is. Thank you.
Just take a moment there.
Please,
Commissioner Brown.
name and address.
My name is Lisa Kropanik, and I am on 6-Wheeler Lane. So if we're going to take a trip down memory lane, then I'm going to have to include what actually happened many moons ago when my husband and I fundraised the $750,000. We actually fundraised over $800,000, and we did it in 6 days. And we had that opportunity to have the Conservation Committee actually purchase the land. And it was actually my idea to donate 20 acres of that land to the Conservation Committee, because the Tom Paul Trail is very important to everybody here in Westford. I've been a resident on and off in Westford since 1982. So I do appreciate all the green space that we do have here. And we were going to sell that back to the town for $1, and we were going to keep 6 of those acres and develop 2 single-family homes, and that is it. Even though on the recorded deed for the Conways, it did state there was only going to be 1 home. The Conways were not that pleased with us at that point in time either, because we wanted to do 2. So, that said, it is very disheartening to hear that they're making the builders are making some big ploy that they donated 20 acres when that was already on the table ahead of time. And unfortunately, the town did not side with the Conservation Committee and the community, which, by the way, we had a record amount of people here in this courtroom. They sided with the builders instead, which, so be it, that's fine. The issue that I think a lot of people here in town have is that this case already did go to the Massachusetts Land Court, and I think everyone was really under the impression that when something this serious goes to the Massachusetts Land Court, that the Land Court judge explicitly reviews the recorded deeds and issues a permanent binding order that outlines the exact scope of the easement. Once recorded at the Middlesex North Registry of Deeds, that court order attaches permanently to the land records, meaning any future builder, bank, title company, or town board is legally bound by it forever. That's straight from the courts there. So I guess we're all a little confused why we're here looking at
What was
3
recorded?
homes.
The
That there was supposed to be a 2-home, not 2-lot, but 2-home subdivision only.
So, no, I've had this discussion at length with town staff and town council getting ready for the meeting.
Mhm.
The land court was dealing with the specifics of the easement and right of passage over the easement.
Mhm.
It's been, what was presented to me was it did not address 2 versus 3, okay?
Well,
the ability to use that easement for a subdivision.
it did say 2-home only. I mean, in the court records, that's what it says.
I would appreciate if you share that with Joe, where
Okay.
it can point out in there that says 2 only, but
Okay.
it's been our understanding that that was not there. So the concern we've had tonight has been what the discussion was amongst the applicant with the board.
Mhm.
Because I specifically looked into that.
Do you want me to address that quickly, Mr. Chair? So the litigation that was brought was an appeal of the approval of a 2-lot subdivision. That's what was before the court. The court was reviewing the approval of a 2-lot subdivision, and the court ruled that the waivers granted for that 2-lot subdivision were appropriate.
2-lot.
Because that's what was.
That was what was before them.
Before the court. Nothing about that in any way suggests that we can't then come back. And I also want to clarify, there's nothing in the Conway's deed that promises 1 lot. It refers to a plan from 1969 that says there can only be 1 additional lot without coming back to the planning board, because it was an A&R approval. That's all it says, and we're coming back to the planning board. So this notion that somehow that was written in stone is just not true.
That's unfortunate for the people who live there, who bought the property, I suppose, because I think that's what people are under the impression.
Please speak to the board.
I think that's what people are under the impression, is that, at least I know myself and a lot of the people on Wheel Lane that unfortunately couldn't make it here tonight, we're all under the impression that, this was going to be for 2 homes, especially where the community rallied together and fundraised $800,000 to Westford to make
But
it
that's
for
not the
its
point. I
2
guess
homes.
I understand that.
So,
What I'm looking for is,
okay, so addressing the
Addressing
safety issues.
concerns
My
regarding
son
the
was hit
plan.
by a car in the center of town. My friend's son was also hit by a car in the center of town. The center of town is completely crazy. It's so crazy that every year everyone has these massive conversations about streetlights and where the traffic is gonna go. It is absolutely ridiculous. We cannot even cross the street already now with the amount of homes and the traffic between 495 and Route 3. Honest to goodness, sometimes it takes you 10 minutes just to get out of your driveway.
okay,
I mean, the safety issues, we do have a preschool across the street and a preschool down the street. So to have even more homes dumping into town center, which is tiny, is a lot. So addressing the safety issues, have we done any, safety, have we looked into any, safety traffic issues related to adding another home? I remember when there was a discussion that there was a third home, that they wouldn't have access to Main Street. I remember that being a thing, because the amount of barrels that are already up there and the amount of snow that comes in when it's plowed, the visibility is very, very low. So there is serious safety issues there. It is very difficult in the center of town to walk anywhere. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So one question I have, Joe, as we set up the site walk, are we going to limit it to the planning board, or are we going to allow?
Yeah, I mean, it would just be the board members. There wouldn't be any deliberations. It would just be for fact finding.
Are residents allowed to observe?
I mean, that would be up to the applicant.
I don't know.
If they wanted to.
But yeah,
Well-
and before, as we discuss this, there is no deliberations as we do a site walk. There will be questions. Primarily, it's us walking and listening to
Yeah.
town
Just
staff
gather
and the
information
applicant
about the
pointing
property.
out.
I mean, do you have an issue if people want to come on the public? I
Sure.
mean, the issue the concern I usually have
Liability.
is liability, handicap access. I mean, it's not,
That's fine, okay, I just want to make that
the
clear.
road's open to the public.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna call the cops for trespass if someone shows up, but I don't know that we want to affirmatively invite anyone.
It's fine.
And,
I just want to make sure we're very clear with the audience what's happening.
yeah.
Okay.
Emily Byrne, again, 8 Wheeler Lane. I submitted several comments earlier this month, and I think it made it into the packet. I'm not going to go over those, but I would appreciate the board to take a good look at those and be able to provide some feedback to us. I think the big thing I did want to reiterate, and I know there's a lot of discussion around it, but I guess from my perspective, I only moved here in 2022, so I haven't had the history that there has been, but it has become clear to me. I have 2 young kids. We walk across the street to Rodenbush every day. We can barely get across the street. My husband usually jumps out and stops traffic himself. I will never let my kids cross that street because nobody sees you. I've had police officers. My husband has stepped out and the police officer has been nearby and come and pulled over somebody. Nobody stops at the crosswalk. So I think traffic
Again, I understand that, but I'm not sure
But
that's,
traffic is a huge issue. So even adding another house with another set of cars and another set of visitors to that house is worth consideration, is what I'm asking. Because I think that there's a lot of traffic at the center of town right now. And I think that the waivers for the road, as we've been discussed, have all been based on 2 lots, nothing about 3. So I would ask that the board, as I did in my letter, go back and revisit those waivers and make sure that it's not just the applicant stating that it's fine for have 3 houses, but that the board, the fire, everybody on the board side agrees that
the
that's
process for that is we will be receiving reports for town engineering and other town
Great.
committees.
Okay, so it's not
Fire and
just the
safety.
applicant.
It's not just us sitting listening to the applicant.
Great.
We are a long way from the end of this process. There are a lot of reports that we will have to receive before we ever start discussing this.
Okay. And then I think this was sort of dovetailing with what I said before about the clearing on the lot. I do want to make sure that this issue stays separate, that initial over-clearing gets addressed independent of this 3rd lot creation and not as not folding into a 3rd lot should it be approved. And also a plan for the reforestation of the land or something that will hold them accountable for what was done without justification. And then I do have a couple process things that I'll tick through quickly if that's okay. I think we already discussed that the drainage is showing that it's going on to the other lot. You already addressed that the stormwater management plan will allow that, so that's gonna be done. I did see that the stormwater report states that the peak runoff rates are staying within the compliance zone, but it does say that the volume reaching the wetland increases, and there's no discussion or mention of that by the engineering, in the engineering review, and so I just thought that was worth looking at. I think that it sounds like that's gonna be a real impact to the wetland if additional water is flowing into the wetland. And I guess on that note, given the fact that this runs through wetland buffer zones on the site, is Conservation Commission involved, and have they weighed in, and have they reviewed all of this? I guess I just don't understand how there's not a parallel process going with Conservation Commission. And maybe that's not really for the board to address, but I don't know how to bring that up without there being a meeting at the Conservation Commission to bring it up. And then I did.
Have any permits been submitted to? the
No
conservation
work
at this time?
proposed within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Okay.
Right. So the Conservation Commission already reviewed Lot 2, I guess, and, you know, for any work that was back here towards the wetland. In terms of anything on Lot
There's
3
nothing-
is not within their jurisdiction, so they
Right.
want to review it.
And so the wetland impacts
So
wouldn't
it's not,
trigger
we're
any,
not within 100 feet of the buffer, you don't have to go before conservation.
even though you're changing to a wetland? Even though you're changing the flows to a wetland? That all falls under stormwater management?
All falls under stormwater management.
Okay.
Town engineer will review that information for stormwater management.
Okay. And I think in general, I haven't heard why a third lot is needed here. Everybody is opposed to it, and the developer is the one who wants it, but I haven't understood why. I mean, just because we want another expensive home in the center of town, I just would like to understand
So the applicant has a
justification for
right to
it.
come before us to ask
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's not whether they need it or they don't need it. So it's a little bit different than, say, like a zoning board of appeals where there's leeway in decisions that can be made. We have the leeway in waivers, but if they follow what the subdivision control guidelines,
Okay, fair.
our zoning, and what the state guidelines are, and if they meet the qualifications, they can get the third house.
Okay. And how does it, just for process, how is it addressed, like the other comments in my letter, will that all come out at the following hearing? Well, if there's additional items that I had noted that we don't need to discuss here, but more like there's a discrepancy in numbers, like how will that be addressed?
What discrepancy in numbers?
On my notes, I had been looking at the plans, and I don't know if it's important or not, but that's why I was asking. It's noting a regularity factor as like 0.68 in one spot and 0.4 in the blow-up spot, in the call-out box, and seems like that's directly tied to the zoning regulation for whether a lot is feasible to be built, so I just think it should be clarified and cleared up so that there's no
So I think a lot of this will be done in
inconsistencies.
engineering reviews. We'll certainly get a copy of this as well to make sure that any discrepancies that you found are brought forward.
Is the engineering review what was included in the meeting packet?
It hasn't occurred yet, for the most part.
No, it hasn't done that. They just submitted. So what will happen next is the board or the chair may direct town staff to ask engineer to start reviewing these plans.
Okay.
Yeah, because that
Okay.
doesn't happen until the public hearing's been opened.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Lisa Krupianik, 6 Wheeler Lane. I just have a question here. I'm new to all this. I do have the report on the land court here, Commonwealth of Massachusetts Land Court, Department of Trial Court, John and Regina Conway versus the town Westford Planning Boards. So in here, just so that I can understand this, it states here, sorry, I'm like practically blind, so hang on. It said, well, let me turn it this way, hold on, I apologize, I know it's late, but I do want to understand this. It says here, the Conways, I'm sorry, I just had it, hang on here, bear with me.
Can you summarize what the point is?
It still says that there's a 2-lot, 2-home subdivision.
We
in-
certainly will have our
We understand the nature of what they reviewed, but it was not, they were not reviewing it for 2 versus 3. They were reviewing it.
I think they're reviewing it 1 versus 2, if I remember correctly.
wasn't my understanding. But we're gonna continue this, so we
Okay.
can discuss this when you find it.
Okay, thank you.
And we will have a question out to our town council to make sure that they review that.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Dave Guthrie, applicant. Two issues. One, I don't know that you need to pull plans for utilities run to lot 3. There are utilities run there, or to current lot 2. We ran utilities there. Not under the presumption that we were getting a third lot here, but that we would be doing something on that, an ADU or a garage to part of lot 2, or moving the house that was shown down low to move it up high. So we, rather than tear up the road in the future, we stub the utilities at our own cost. So you can pull plans, or we can highlight those to you on the sidewalk.
Okay.
It was not under the presumption we were automatically rubber stamping a third lot tonight. As far as the site walk goes, I don't believe we need neighbors there. This is contentious. It's been to court. There's a citizen's petition with signatures from people all over town. There can't be a discussion or a debate with you at the site walk relative to what's going on there. So I would suggest if the neighbors have concerns, they send a letter to Joe, he hands you those concerns, you review them when you're out there. But I don't know that we need to make a circus out
That's
of the
fine,
sidewalk.
but we've had other site walks where we have had neighbors and butters participate. I just want to make it clear here whether or not they were coming,
Yep.
so they understood. So that's fine.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Tim Dillon, 2 War Hill Road. I just would like to hear addressed what I've heard about insufficient setbacks for some water management.
I think that's for the,
Detention
those for the
basin.
proposed temporary retention
For
pond.
the-
Oh, that's the other matter, that's not this matter.
That's gonna go
The
away.
temporary?
I'm happy to address it, Mr. Dillon, if you like. That is not adjacent to your property, Mr. Dillon, this is up higher. It's a temporary measure. It's either going to be concluded through some sort of construction on that higher lot, ADU, new house, whatever it is, and also addressed down on the lower lot, once we have a final house plan there, because there'll be drains installed for gutter drains installed in the ground, so that's a comprehensive plan that we have to submit once we finalize the home there, all in compliance with the setback.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? With that, can I get a motion to continue?
Can I just say one
Joe?
thing, Mr. Chair? I just, just because it was brought up earlier, I just wanted to apologize if folks felt I wasn't being responsive. It was just, because we didn't know what exactly would get installed out there, I didn't report back what, the ultimate conclusion was gonna be. So I just wanted to say that on the record.
Yeah, I think there was confusion about the letter that said 15th of June, and that's what this meeting tonight is in fact satisfying.
I want to apologize to Joe. Our non-compliance in the stormwater management plan put Joe in that position, so we apologize to Joe for that.
With that, can I get a motion to continue this hearing to 14 September 2026 at 7 PM in this room?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And Joe, if we could, let's ensure that we can get a site
Visit
visit
before.
scheduled.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the board's time.
With that said, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.